Let's cut some leather with a laser. What's up? I'm Jonathan and welcome to Maker Tales, where I'm sharing my maker journey to help you go further in yours. So don't forget to subscribe and hit that little bell icon to never miss an opportunity to keep making. This video is all about playing around with leather and seeing what I can make with it. Now, first of all, a little safety and disclaimer thing. So first of all, the disclaimer is I have no idea what I'm doing with leather. This is very much an experimentation. I want to tell you the results that I've got that have worked well for me. If you want to see a true leather craftsman, YouTube is filled with them and it really is amazing. I hopefully one day will get to a higher level than I am right now, but take all the things that I'm doing just with leather with a pinch of salt, because I don't really know what I'm doing, but I got some decent results from what I have been exploring with. When it comes to safety, make sure that you're using the right type of leather with a laser, because leather comes as pleather, as fake leather, chrome tan leather, which is chemically tanned leather, and vegetable tan leather, which is leather that has been tanned using a natural process, so no real industrial chemicals are used. Because if you use things like chrome leather, you're going to have chromium that gets exposed. Some chrome tan leathers, especially the ones with color, do also have some trace amounts of chlorine, so that can really screw up your laser or your health. And when it comes to the pleather, they have PVC, which quite frankly, that's pure chlorine cutting for your laser, which if you don't like your laser, that's what you do. The next thing to do with laser cutting after you know that it's safe to cut is finding the settings. I spent far too long trying to find the settings for leather because I forgot that leather isn't very regular in the sense that it's between 1.2 and 1.6 millimeters, the shoulder cut that I have here. And I was having real problems because I wanted to just get a beautifully clean cut. And I realized what I have to find here is the correct way to cut my leather, the correct way to kiss cut it, and the correct way to engrave it separately, and finding the correct processes. So I'm going to show you now some processes of me cutting my leather to create some awesome keyrings that I've been making here. So I've got this one here and these here as well. Now let's just go and show you how I made these. So first of all, when it comes to leather, there is the smooth side and this rough side. This rough side is called the flesh side of leather. And I had no idea how to deal with this because I found that when I was cutting it, it was getting all frayed and horrible. The edges weren't looking nicely sharp and cut. So after a little bit of Googling, I found out that you've got to sort of mesh this backside back down. I don't have any of these fancy gums and things that you can put on the back, but what I did have was beeswax furniture polish and a glass bottle. So that's what I did. I put some beeswax furniture polish on the back of my leather, and I then used a glass bottle to really go ahead and push that in and just merge all the back fibers together to create a consistent back. Now, do keep in mind that while you're doing this, don't get any of the beeswax on the other side of the leather because that's going to stain your leather. Anyway, once you've done that to your leather, you now have a really nice, smooth, non-fuzzy flesh side that can actually take on an engraving very nicely. Here's an example of the flesh side engraving that comes out pretty nicely. So with that done, let's go ahead and chuck it into the laser. Now what I do is I use some magnets to really stretch out my leather to keep it as flat as possible. I also check around if there's any bumps, and if there is, that's where I put a small magnet to try and keep it down, because my first pass is engraving. Now when it comes to engraving, I did a lot of testing here and I found that the best result was a super low power. So I have my Glowforge, which is a 45 watt laser, at a 10% power at a speed of 1000 and a DPI of 256. And that there gave me a nice clean engraving without too much smoke bleeding from the engraving itself. And one of the key problems with leather is smoke staining. You're going to find that if you have too high a power when you're doing an engraving, you're going to get big smoke staining underneath. And honestly, at that point, it's pretty much in the bin, because once you wet leather, it just never is the same. and you can try using saddle soap and all the rest, but I found, me personally, I couldn't get this to be cleaned, and I searched for hours trying to find a solution for this. Anyway, next up, let's go into cutting the leather. So when it came to cutting the leather, after I'd done my engraving pass, I go and put masking tape all over my leather, making sure that it's really securely placed down. And it's as easy as that. Once it's placed down, you then go ahead and cut it. My cut settings are at 200 speed and at 95% power to make sure that I get through the leather. Now, once we've cut it here, you'll see so much smoke staining that comes from it. Now, if you're wanting to do some engraving on the back side of tags, all you have to do at this point is now flip it, use the leather that you have there as a guide, and don't move anything inside of your software. And that there is my last leather pass. Now, of course, at this point, I just take my leather out and I go and do all my other cuts for all these little wooden bits that I'll explain later on. Now, with all my wooden things done, I go ahead into the workshop and I take all the masking tape off, and I also sand down all the wooden bits. Here are all my leather straps, pieces of wood and hardware ready to be put together. As you can see, I've already created one version of each type of keyring here, but what I really wanted to explore now was staining the leather itself. Now, I did try to stain the leather using some wood stains, but I wasn't really getting the result that I wanted. So what I eventually went for is getting some EcoFlow leather stain itself. And I have to say, I am really happy I did, because it comes on so easily and stains it so beautifully. And if you want, you can really go for it, and it gets really dark. So you really have a lot of variety from one color. So for this, I pretty much just used a stick, a bit of kitchen towel, dipped it lightly, and then just went over it as quick as possible, because if you go too slowly or you put on too much, it's going to get really stained, really dark. Lastly, one other little project that I had was these little leather presses. Now, leather presses, usually you have to use a big press of tons of force or whatever, but what I found is all I did was I laser engraved a reverse of what I'm wanting to press. And then from there, I make sure that the positive is what's going to be the negative of here. And then all I do is I wet the leather with my finger just a little bit beforehand. And then I go ahead and I center and press this engraving down. I then just clamp it down for about 5-10 minutes. And at that point, I get a lovely pressed piece of leather. So from here, I'm just going to give you a lovely little montage of me putting all these last bits and pieces together, and then I'll show you what I came out with at the end. Now, just keep in mind, these little things here are called double cap rivets, just in case you're wanting them, and everything that I'm using here is going to be linked down in the description. So by the end of all that, I ended up with a whole bunch of keyrings. Now, let's go talking through these. Simple tab keyring, which is engraved on both sides, very nice and handy for labeling things. We have the pressed leather, which in all honesty is super classy. I do really like functional keyrings, so we have the teeny tiny Maker Tails logo with 1 inch on the bottom and 3 centimeters on the side, so you always have a way of doing measurements. And my favorite one is the phone stand. Now, I did try and do this through just a leather version, but I have to say I was not liking how this was coming out. It felt like it was only going to last maybe a month, and then at that point it would never hold up a phone again. So I tried to look up online how other phone stands work, and what you mainly see is a big bit of wood holding a phone. So I was just like, how can I make a big bit of wood not big? Well, spread it open and use the leather itself as the joint. So this here is my end result, and I have to say I am super happy about this. Now, if you've enjoyed my experimentation here and want to get a hold of some of these yourself, you can go over to my Etsy where you can get the actual Maker Tales merch itself, or you can get just the files for you to be able to create whatever you want with them. A huge thank you to my patrons. You guys are absolutely awesome and it means so much to me. And if you think I'm worthy of your support, I would love to see you there too. Don't forget that we have a Discord channel now, so that is down in the description. Join the conversation and see what us makers are getting up to. Thank you for watching, keep making, and let the quest continue.